Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. These old images don't scream for attention. They wait, quietly, for the moment someone finally looks back. The third sister, Black Forest, Germany. 1896. They stood close together at the edge of the trees. Sisters dressed alike for the summer photograph, hands folded as their mother had instructed. Anna smiled easily, the way she always did when adults were watching. Marta did not. She had been told not to smile because the picture was meant to be proper. And because someone was missing, the photographer asked them to remain still while the light settled. Leaves shifted behind them, then seemed to pause, as if listening. When the photograph was developed, the dresses appeared unevenly darkened, stained as though moisture had risen from the earth itself. Between the sisters, a faint shape pressed forward. No face, no clear outline, only the impression of a body standing too close. Their mother said nothing when she saw the print. She touched it once, quietly, as if counting. Years later, Anna would insist they had never gone into the woods alone. Marta never corrected her. The guest who didn't drink, Savannah, Georgia, 1952. It was meant to be a small celebration, nothing formal. Lillian had just bought the refrigerator, proud of how modern the kitchen felt. And her niece June insisted on music and streamers. Someone took the photograph when June lifted her glass and laughed too loudly, arms stretched toward the ceiling as if she were already dancing ahead of the room. Lillian sat in front, composed, smiling the careful smile she used for cameras. She remembered hearing the shutter click and thinking the evening felt unusually full, though only a few guests had come. Later, when the print arrived, they noticed the shape first. Not sharp, not solid. Reflected near the refrigerator door. A pale face hovered where no one had stood, eyes open, mouth calm, as if waiting to be offered a drink. June joked about double exposure. Lillian did not laugh. She said some guests only appear once, just to see who remembers them afterward. The man who let the room decide. Paris, France, 1901. The photograph shows a collector at ease in his own rooms, one hand resting on the mantel as if the house belonged to him completely. Henri Duval was known for his taste. Masks from distant places, statues without names, objects chosen more for feeling than value. He said a room should remember things for you. The fire was unlit that day, though the season was cold. Henri leaned there anyway, trusting the stone to hold its warmth. What unsettled people later was not the masks or the shadows, but the faint figure forming inside the hearth glass. A woman's shape, small and dim, her face turned outward, as if watching the room learn her outline. Henri never commented on it. He kept the photograph displayed until his death, insisting the house had finally arranged itself properly. Afterward, visitors said the room felt occupied, even when empty, as if the collector had taught it how to keep someone. The Empty Hearth, Lower Austria, 1904. The photograph was meant to show ordinary work. A young woman seated beside the hearth, pausing between stirring and waiting. Her name was Elise, and this was her mother's kitchen, kept neat even in winter. The bench to the right was left empty on purpose, so the light would fall cleanly across the room. Everyone agreed it made the space feel calm. When the plate was developed, the hearth looked wrong. The firebox was dark, yet a pale warmth seemed to rise from it, softening the edges of the room. The chair nearest the stove appeared slightly turned, as if someone had just stood up. Elise remembered nothing like that. She remembered being alone, listening to the clock, counting the minutes until the pot boiled. The One Who Stayed in the Water, Norfolk, England, 1913. The girl in the foreground had dressed for the afternoon carefully, boots laced high, net slung over her shoulder, smiling as if the river were a friendly thing. Edith liked to fish where the water spread thin and bright, where you could still see the bottom and convince yourself it was shallow everywhere. She remembered her cousin standing farther back, teasing her for posing instead of casting. The river was cold but steady, moving the reeds in a patient rhythm. When the photograph was printed, Edith noticed the distance felt wrong. The figure behind her was blurred, pale, standing where the water should have been deeper. No ripples touched her legs. Years later, Edith said she stopped fishing after that summer. She claimed the river had a way of keeping what it liked. The photograph remained on her mantle, the water frozen around her boots, and behind her, someone still waiting for the current to finish its work. The weight of the wet cloth. Loire Valley, France, 1921. Laundry day had always been communal. The riverbank filling with talk and familiar movements. The women worked from habit, sleeves rolled, skirts pinned, hands knowing the weight of soaked fabric without looking. Marie stood closest to the water, lifting a sheet that caught the light just enough to please the camera. She remembered laughing when the photograph was taken, because her dress felt heavier than it should have, clinging oddly at the front. She assumed it was only dampness, river water rising where it pleased. No one thought to check. When the image was printed, the stain appeared clearer. An uneven shadow gathered over Marie's skirt, shaped like a torso pressed against her legs, darker than wet cloth alone. It did not match the folds, nor the way fabric falls. The other women dismissed it as a trick of light. Marie never wore that dress again. She said some burdens arrived quietly, and once carried, they refused to be set down. The Space That Watched, Alberta, Canada, 1910. They camped just beyond the tree line, two men pleased with the quiet and the fish drying overhead. The tent was pitched unevenly, one corner lifting where the ground dipped. Neither bothered to fix it. Night would come soon enough. The photograph was taken in the late afternoon, while they talked and smoked, the canvas breathing slightly in the wind. Nothing felt unusual then. The forest stayed still. Only later did they notice the darkness beneath the tent's edge had gathered into a shape. A face pressed close to the gap, low to the ground, eyes turned outward, patient and alert. It did not belong to either man, and it was too close to be outside. They never camped there again. One of them said the land had been watching long before they arrived, and the tent had simply given it a place to look through. The one who returned. Eastern Front, 1916. They were photographed before dusk. Coats buttoned high, faces already practiced at waiting. Carl stood on the left, older by minutes, eyes fixed on something beyond the trees. Otto stood beside him, matching posture, matching expression, as if repetition might keep them safe. The picture was sent home, folded once, then unfolded many times. Their mother noticed the first thing was wrong with Carl's collar. It sat too neatly, as though adjusted after the shutter closed. The second thing was harder to name. Otto's shadow fell slightly forward, while Carl's did not fall at all. Weeks later, the letter arrived. Only one name was crossed out. The photograph remained on the mantel, unchanged. Their mother said it was a comfort to know one of her sons had made it back. She never said which one. The space between them. Milan, Italy, 1938. They were asked to sit naturally, as if caught mid-conversation. Sophia crossed her legs, hands folded carefully in her lap. Elena leaned back, one arm stretched along the sofa, claiming more room than she needed. The photographer told them not to smile. It was meant to feel modern, honest. When the photograph came back, the space between them looked wrong. The cushion dipped inward, not under either woman, but between them, as if pressed by a weight that had just lifted. A pale shape lingered there, soft and unfinished, like an arm that had forgotten where to rest. Neither woman mentioned it. By then, they were no longer speaking. Years later, Sophia said the room always felt crowded when Elena visited. Elena said it felt empty the moment she left. The photograph kept the space exactly as it was. Something present, something missing, and neither willing to move. The third pair of hands. Lancashire, England, 1909. The women leaned forward together. Sleeves damp, wrists aching from the familiar rhythm of washing. It was work meant to be shared, the kind that passed the time if you spoke softly and did not look up too often. The tubs were placed close so they could keep pace with one another. The photographer asked them to hold still, just for a moment, hands pressed into the cloth as they were. Neither woman noticed anything strange then, only the cold seeping through the boards beneath their feet. When the photograph was developed, the water appeared disturbed. Between their arms, beneath the surface of the tub, a third pressure seemed to form. Fabric pulled tight where no hands should be. Folds drawn inward as if gripped from below. The one still awake. Pearl Harbor Naval Hospital, Hawaii, 1942. They slept wherever there was room. Chairs, couches, the floor. Uniforms creased by exhaustion rather than habit. The photographer stood above them quietly, careful not to wake anyone. It was the first night in weeks when the building felt almost calm. Most of the men remembered nothing afterward. Only the deep heaviness of sleep that comes when fear finally loosens its grip. The photograph was meant to be proof of that calm, a record of bodies at rest. Later, someone noticed the figure in the center of the room. It stood upright where no chair had been placed, pale and narrow, its outline thinner than a man should be. It did not touch the floor. It did not cast a shadow. The nurses said the hospital never truly slept that winter. Someone always stayed awake, making sure the others could rest, even if he no longer needed to. The one who waited by the wall. Chicago, Illinois, 1956. The photograph was taken after dinner, when the room had settled into its evening habits. Margaret stretched her legs across the chaise, cigarette balanced easily between her fingers. Pleased with the color film and the new cocktail glasses, she remembered feeling calm, unobserved, as if the night belonged to her alone. She didn't notice the cold then, or the way the lamp seemed dimmer near the wall. Nothing moved. Nothing needed attention. When the slide was developed, the figure appeared at the far left. Faint, upright, unfinished. It stood where no furniture had ever been placed, pale against the wall, facing the room, but not the woman. It looked as though it had been there for some time, waiting politely. Margaret laughed when it was mentioned, said it was a reflection, a flaw in the film. Still, she stopped sitting with her back to that wall. She said some guests don't interrupt. They wait to be acknowledged. The fourth seat, Topeka, Kansas, 1915. They dragged the bench into the yard because it made them laugh. 3 women balanced carefully, skirts smoothed, hats pinned against the sun. The house behind them was quiet. Doors open to let the heat pass through. Someone shouted for them to hold still just a moment longer. They remembered the photograph as an easy thing. No one fell. No one slipped. The bush behind them barely moved, though a breeze had been promised all afternoon. When the print was finished, the laughter faded. In the center of the hedge, between their shoulders, a darker shape gathered. Upright, narrow, as if someone had chosen to stand there instead of sit. It bent slightly forward, following the angle of their bodies, close enough to be part of the game. They joked about shadows and leaves. Still, none of them could recall leaving space for a fourth, and none of them ever posed there again. The stain that learned the stairs. New Orleans, Louisiana, 1989. The photograph was taken by accident, meant only to show the water damage spreading along the stairwell wall. The house was old, but not historic. The kind of place where problems arrived slowly and stayed. The mark had appeared after a storm, yellowed and uneven, shaped by leaks no one could quite find. At first, it looked like nothing more than damp plaster. Then someone noticed it leaned forward, following the rise of the steps. The longer you looked, the more it suggested a shoulder, a bowed head, a body paused, midway up. No one remembered seeing it move. Yet it never seemed in the same place twice. Some mornings it hovered lower, as if tired. Other days it climbed, faint but deliberate. The owners patched the wall and repainted it carefully. The stain returned within weeks, unchanged. They said houses remember how people leave them, and sometimes practice the motion long after. The face that survived the fire. Appalachia, United States, 1887. The photograph had been kept folded inside a Bible. Its edges burned and brittle, the surface darkened until most of the image was lost. It was said to be a family portrait once, though no one could remember how many people it showed. A house fire had taken the rest. What remained was a single face, pale against the scorched black, one eye clearer than the other, watching from the ruin of the print. The body around it had vanished, eaten by heat and time, leaving the expression suspended and unfinished. Relatives argued it was damage, smoke and chemicals pulling shapes from nothing. Yet no matter how the photograph aged, the face did not fade further. It stayed exactly as it was, untouched. The Bible was eventually buried with its last owner. Years later, when the grave was moved, the book was gone. Only the face was found, pressed flat against the soil, as if it had never learned how to disappear. The shape that rose after sleep. Copenhagen, Denmark, 1974. The photograph was taken in the morning, the light pale and forgiving. The bed was left unmade on purpose, sheets folded back the way they always were after a restless night. Nothing in the room felt unusual. The walls were bare. The air was still. She remembered waking alone. She remembered that clearly. When the film was developed, the bed looked heavier than it should have. The pillows pressed inward as if someone had risen only moments before. Against the far wall, a faint figure stood where the corner met the light. Soft at the edges, unfinished. Its outline barely separate from the paint. It had no feet. It did not touch the floor. Friends said it was motion blur, a trick of exposure. She nodded and agreed. Still, she began smoothing the sheets each morning, careful to erase the shape of a body before leaving the room. She said sleep leaves impressions. Some of them take longer to fade. The Second Shadow in the Orchard, Transylvania, Romania, 1911. The woman stood patiently beneath the apple trees, hands folded as blossoms fell around her like late snow. She had agreed to the photograph because the orchard was in bloom, and because it pleased her to be remembered among things that returned each year. The petals blurred the air, softening the edges of the world. She remembered standing alone. She was certain of that. When the photograph was developed, the orchard looked deeper than it should have, the trees receding into a darker green. Behind her, between the trunks, a second figure had formed. Tall, narrow, and pale, its outline barely separate from the falling blossoms. It stood at a respectful distance, facing the same direction, as if waiting its turn. Neighbors said it was a trick of light, branches crossing, nothing more. The woman nodded, but she stopped walking through the orchard at dusk. She said some shadows bloom later than others, and not all of them belong to the living. The fourth reflection, Dayton, Ohio, 1968. They sat close together on the sofa. Three sisters arranged the way they always were, shoulders touching, smiles practiced and patient. The room had been prepared carefully. The lamp centered, the wall hanging straightened, the mirror polished until it held the light without complaint. Someone said it would be nice to have one good photograph before winter. None of them remembered anyone standing behind them. When the slide was developed, the mirror showed more than it should have. Between the reflected lamp and the curve of the sofa, a pale shape leaned forward, its outline thin and uncertain, as if still deciding whether to appear. It did not match any body in the room. Its head sat slightly higher than the others, watching from a distance that did not exist. They laughed and said mirrors always add things. Still, the photograph was never framed. The mirror stayed. After that, no one sat with their back to it. The distance they didn't measure. Emilia-Romagna, Italy, 1932. They laid the blanket on the grass because the afternoon was clear and the hill felt empty. The stone buildings above them were old storage houses, or so they'd been told. Thick walls, no windows, nothing to pay attention to. They posed easily, leaning back, faces turned toward the camera as if the day had been chosen just for them. Neither remembered anyone walking behind them. The field had been quiet. Wind moved the grass, nothing more. When the photograph was developed, the space between foreground and hill looked altered. Near the buildings, a pale figure stood where no path led. Upright and narrow, its edges softened as if distance alone could erase it. It was too close to be background, too still to be passing. They argued it was light on the lens, a fault of depth. Still, they never returned to that hill. Later, they said some places keep watch from afar and prefer not to be approached, only noticed once. Before we end, ask yourself this. These may be old photos, lighting flaws, or forgotten techniques. Or they may be moments when something stayed behind the camera's reach. If you saw something, a figure, a face, or just a feeling, leave a comment below. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want to keep exploring these images with me. Some photographs don't stop watching when the picture ends.